Let's turn to Germany next. Police have made 25 arrests against members of a far-right terror group suspected of planning an attack on Parliament. More than 3,000 officers took part in early morning raids. Let's go live to Berlin. We can speak to our correspondent Damien McGuinness. Great to have you with us, Damien. This is quite an exceptional story. Talk our viewers through what we know so far.
Yeah, well, this is the largest anti-terror raid Germany has ever known, Nuala. So what we're talking about are 3,000 officers nationwide, dozens of raids, including in army barracks. And that's because this is a far-right group known as Reichsbürger, and literally translated as citizens of the Reich. And what they believe in, they want to undermine the modern German state. They want to overthrow the government, and they want to found a state based on the German Empire, or Reich, from 1871. Now, this is a very fringe movement, potentially a very violent movement, and that's why officers have taken this so seriously, because some of the people involved in this movement, some of the people arrested, the 25 people arrested, were former officers, former soldiers. One of them was a former member of the National Parliament here in Berlin. She was working as a judge until she was arrested. There was also a minor aristocrat who is thought to be the ringleader of this. This movement has some quite high-profile figures, some of whom are armed, some of whom have access to weapons, and that's why it's being taken incredibly seriously. Although it also has to be said, Nuala, that there aren't any indications that this plan would have been successful. This is a very radical group, but also a very fringe group. They've been going for decades, since the 80s, and even though they're armed, and even though there are outbreaks of violence regularly, they're not seen as an imminent threat to the German state, in the sense that this is something where there have been any injuries so far in this particular plot, or anyone's died in this plot, but it's being taken seriously enough to show really that nationwide raids have been merited. And, you know, we've seen dozens of arrests so far, and more are likely to come. It's
so interesting. I'm sure people, Damien, will start pointing out parallels that they may see with the United States if we think of some of the more far-right groups, particularly in the aftermath of the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. I mean, is online a big part of this group? Are they very well known? What their, I don't know, membership or motives are?
Yeah, it is interesting. There are links to the US conspiracy movement QAnon. This movement, the Reichsbürger movement, the Citizens of the Reich movement, goes back to the 80s. So this has been going for decades. We have times in Germany where they seem to be more active, other times when they seem to be less active. What we've seen over the last few years, and particularly during the pandemic, is that all sorts of different groups, very disparate groups, including anti-vaxxers, COVID deniers, far-right extremists, all coalescing around this Reichsbürger movement, in a way really to say that the German state is not legitimate. And I think there are links to the US, this idea of a deep state. What the people of this movement talk about, they say that Germany isn't a real country. Modern Germany is in fact a company, a firm they call it, that's run by the US or by the Allies. And they say that the real Germany is the one that was before the First World War. And that's what they want to get back to. They don't recognize the German state. These people refuse to pay taxes. Regularly you have shootouts with police in houses in some parts of Germany. So this is something that does ebb and flow. But I think the fact that there's been so much going on in the US connected to certain conspiracy theories, and particularly linked to the pandemic, and you know, a small but radical movement within Germany of people who say that the vaccine is the problem and not COVID itself. And even though these groups are very small and very fringe, some of them are quite radical. And what we're seeing, according to police today, and certainly according to what we've seen over the last few years, is that some of these people are prepared to use violence to do what they think is the right thing, which they believe they want to overthrow the German state. They just don't believe in the legitimacy of modern Germany. That's why they're seen as such a danger.
Damien, thank you so much for giving us that analysis and understanding really of what's happening in Germany.